Hey, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, possibly a few good evenings. Today we are going to go into several features of the Ivanti neurons for patch management experience. And to do that, I'm going to be jumping through a couple of different demonstration environments. So my name is Chris Gettle. For those of you who don't know, I'm Vice President of Product Management for Ivanti's Exposure Management Group. And that includes our patching technology along with our risk-based vulnerability management, external attack surface management, and we're rapidly expanding into this broader exposure management experience where we're kind of bringing many of these pieces together in more of a platform end-to-end experience where we're giving you the ability to better respond to and configure for making sure that you're keeping your risk level within the boundaries of your risk appetite. Today, the three main things we're going to be covering, we're going to go into a demonstration of ring deployment, setting that up. We're going to talk a little bit about the inclusion of a new, the user survey feature of our platform has been in the product for a little while now, but we're directly integrating it with the patch experience to better handle the types of issues that occur during a rollout. And then we're going to touch on our preferred server release. Now, we only had 30 minutes for this scheduled, but there's a number of additional features that are just releasing between end of last week and today for our quarterly release, our July release for Ivanti Neurons for Patch Management. If you've got the time, I'm going to be running past that 30-minute endpoint with some additional features we're going to cover. If you don't have time for that, don't worry. Drop when you need to, and you can catch the rest of those features on the follow-up recording that'll be sent out to you after the event. All right, so a couple of things real quick. First of all, ring deployment. This is getting into, trying to roll out updates with additional guardrails. We've got two very important things kind of fighting for priority here. There's the urgency of responding to vulnerabilities, especially those that have been exploited. There's a lot more 0 days than ever before. But we also, at the end of the day, need to make sure that we're not breaking the operational environment because that costs us money as well. So we've got two costs, and we've got the need to try to accelerate remediation, but also provide guardrails to prevent it from giving us total outages. The second feature we're going to go into is called preferred server. So think of this as a set repository within segments of your environment. The Neurons platform launched originally with our peer-to-peer technology, and I've got customers running over 30,000, 40,000, 60,000 endpoints using just our peer-to-peer technology in large environments with a lot of scale, and they're not seeing any issues. Peer-to-peer can work extremely well to just make a lightweight configuration, low infrastructure, easy to roll out configuration. There's also the flip side of that. Customers or environments that have a lot more bandwidth restricted environments. They may have bottlenecks in their network that make it so that it's needing a little bit more focus and pre-staging of things to make sure that things happen predictably, and we don't saturate those bottlenecked network segments with a lot of traffic. That's where preferred server comes into play. Preferred server allows you to configure repositories in specific parts of your network and be able to make it so that you can synchronize the updates to those, and then all machines within that segment know exactly where to get their patches from. And you can mix and match those technologies. They can work side by side, and this preferred server becomes a peer number one in that segment of the network. And then in areas where there isn't a preferred server, peer-to-peer will rely on their peers or being able to directly download what they need from the net. And the third feature we're going to talk about is the surveys. So in ring deployment, we've added a new feature to integrate our sentiment survey directly into the ring deployment process. So most ring deployment technologies in the industry today are based off of the passing or failing of the patches. So if I've got a patch that rolls out and it succeeds, the promotion from a ring deployment perspective is, oh yeah, 100% success, move on. roll out to production. Well, some of you may be familiar with this issue. Last month, Microsoft pushed out an OS update that happened to break DHCP authentication or DHCP resolution in different environments. It wasn't a widespread issue. It was only some environments, and it was only the servers that had DHCP on them that needed to be controlled. So what happens when you have an issue like that? What happens in the case of Print Nightmare when that rolled out? You push the OS update out and it succeeded, but it broke printing across my entire environment because the print service interaction changed. That's where this need for the sentiment survey comes into play. The pass-fail of a patch is one part of the operational rollout, but what is going to tell us about those other issues? Many of you are relying on tickets, a spike in tickets to tell us things are going on. Some of you are being more proactive and going to email and saying, hey, I'm going to email a group of users in my pilot or early adopter and say, guys, how's the update going? Check everything, make sure it's still working, and try to get that feedback in a timely fashion. Well, we can be more proactive about that, and that's what this feature is really about. So we're going to jump over to a couple of different environments because I've got a couple of different configurations we're going to look at. The first one is going to be around ring deployment. So let me, we're going to come back to this one in just a minute. For right now, though, I'm going to jump back over here. And we're going to look at this environment. And specifically, we're going to look at, I'm going to take a look at some patch configurations that I've set up here to configure for ring deployment. So this is set up for ring deployment and for the use of that sentiment survey. Those of you not familiar with the product, there is, we were one of the first vendors to sign up for CISA's Secure by Design pledge. This has a number of different levels to it of what that means. One of them is around security of the product, best practices for securing. So things like on launch, when you get your new tenant, it's going to try to force you into the best possible practice for that. So if you don't want to use something like single sign-on, you're going to have to explicitly say, no, I want to go down to just, username, password. Like, it's going to try to push you towards the most secure by design doing those things. Best practices in experience in the product is also going to try to drive that type of, here's the recommended approach to doing this. And that's exactly what you're looking at here. This configuration is giving you a very turnkey, out of the box, secure by design principle configuration. Most of you may still be running once a month maintenance from a patch perspective. What we refer to in this configuration as routine maintenance. This is ideal for your monthly patching, your OS updates, any other third parties that are coming out during that time frame. That's where we're going to get into talking about ring deployment. But the accelerated number of exploits, the vulnerabilities that we're encountering, the frequency that these are coming out, all kind of drive towards a new way of trying to approach this. We have to do certain things on a more accelerated cadence. The example I'll use here is specific to browsers. If you look back at between May and June Patch Tuesday, 5-week span, in the May Patch Tuesday week, that Thursday, Google Chrome released an update to resolve a 0-day vulnerability. So that means Chrome and Edge both needed to resolve a 0-day. The next week, there was another update from Chrome, and Mozilla responded to a hacker convention that had a number of different participants were exploiting vulnerabilities in that convention. Those of you who have heard of Pwn to Own, this was the Pwn to Own Berlin event. They showcased, several people had showcased exploiting Firefox vulnerabilities during that event. That, at that point, is considered a public disclosure. Somebody was actively exploiting a vulnerability, and there's enough information that may have been shared where a threat actor could start to actively look at that. So vendors like Mozilla take that very seriously. They released an update within 24 to 48 hours of that event, plugging those vulnerabilities. So we have a Firefox release that had 2 CVEs resolved. The next week, we had more Chrome, Firefox, and Edge updates, all just resolving more vulnerabilities. Then the next week comes out. This is the week right before June Patch Tuesday. Another Chrome 0-day gets resolved. So now we've got a Chrome and an Edge update leading up to Patch Tuesday that both had a 0-day to resolve. Every single week, there were browser updates resolving security vulnerabilities. 3 out of 5 weeks, there were high-risk vulnerabilities, either actively being exploited or disclosed and at high risk of being exploited, that needed to be resolved quickly within our environment. This is probably the single best example of why you should be switching to this priority updates approach. Do that, and now I can set certain applications like the browsers to be updated on a weekly or even a daily basis. We don't know which day of the week those are going to come out. So if I've got an activity that's going to look every day and say, hey, is there a new browser update available? If so, do it. I can also make it so only those applications are updated, and it doesn't need to reboot. You don't need to reboot for a browser update. And then we've also got 0-day response. Out of band is a very reactive approach. A 0-day response means you've already thought through everything. You've defined when when events are allowed to drive a 0-day change if you're responding to a 0-day, and you've got it configured so that all you have to do is make that decision, apply that one patch to the policy, and you know exactly what it's going to do. If I've got it set up to check daily, once I add that patch in there, within 24 hours, machines are going to start to roll that out. Within 48 hours, I should have a burn down that gets me to a point where I should be able to hit compliance and be able to hit a 48-hour SLA for 0-day response. This is the type of out-of-the-box configuration that we provide in Ivanti Neurons. Now, let's get into that routine maintenance. Here, we want to be able to do a controlled rollout of updates across our environment. So we're going to turn on ring deployment. It's already on in this policy. By default, it'll be off because you need to make some decisions when you do this. If we want to use this, we need to start going through and actually configuring the overall rollout. So what's my SLA for my monthly maintenance? If I'm starting on Patch Tuesday, where's the endpoint of this rollout going to occur? If I say that's 15 days, that means from Patch Tuesday out 15 days, that's how long this is going to run end to end. And then we can get into configuring each of our rings. So ring 1, here we want to start and we want to use the delay in number of days. So we're going to say, from the second Tuesday of the month, add 1 day, and that's when I want this first ring to deploy. It's going to start at 1:30 p.m. at local system time. So if I've got agents in this policy across 3 time zones, each one will execute at their local machine time. And so this is going to start with Patch Tuesday, and it's going to add 1 day. So the day after, Wednesday at 1:30 p.m., it's going to start patching my test ring. Now, I can choose to use maintenance windows. We'll come back to that in a second. In this case, though, maintenance windows are usually what you're going to do in production. We want to use a specific window for this. Now, how long do we want to give that pilot, that test ring, to be able to deploy these out and determine if we're going to promote? We're going to give it 2 days. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. By Friday, it's going to evaluate promotion against that success rate. Each patch is going to be evaluated to see pass or fail. Did it successfully meet that criteria? Then we can bring in that survey piece. If I choose to use the surveys, I can turn this on, and that sentiment survey, which I'll show you in a little bit here, can be used to be a broader catch-all for any downstream issues. So this first one is patch level. This one is trying to catch the downstream issues. Now I can say survey a certain percentage of my users in this group, and from that feedback, I need a sentiment level of X, or stop the promotion altogether until I can figure out what's going on. So this is intended to try to catch those cases where a patch succeeds, but something else broke. The only way we're going to find out is through issues coming in through ticketing or reaching out to users to have a conversation. All right, so we move on to our early adopter ring. Add another day, and so that means we're on to Saturday, and I'm going to give it another 2 days of soak time. And in this case, I can choose to use surveys again or not. But in this case, that promotion will occur then by Monday. And in that case, then I now have my production group being my final one. I can delay one more day and start the rollout there. I can deploy during the next maintenance window if I've got those configured. So let's say my maintenance window is set for Fridays between 1 and 5 p.m. And that would mean then that we've gotten through test and early adopter. Now we're leading up to the production group on Friday that week. It's going to then roll out to my production users and wrap up that ring deployment. There's a number of other criteria here to use our vulnerability intel if you want to deploy based on our risk-adjusted scoring. If you wanted to configure for only deploying exploited vulnerabilities, this is a setting that's ideal for that 0-day response if you want to go towards more of a aggressive response to any known exploited vulnerabilities. So there's a variety of different options in here that you can use that we're not going to get deeply into today because we're going to be running out of time here pretty quick. But that gives you an idea of how to configure ring deployment, how to use surveys to not only take care of the pass-fail, but also that sentiment level. How did everything go? Catch those downstream issues and bring that all back into a end-to-end remediation that allows you to ensure that you've got a good production rollout each month with minimal operational impact. All right, so with that, we are going to jump over to preferred server. And for that, I should be able to do that from here as well. So preferred servers require a little bit of pre-configuration before we can set up or we can choose to use that. Actually, I am going to go over here and use this one instead because it's got a little bit of better configuration for this. So my preferred server is there to, again, help me to scale out into different types of environments and make sure that I've got everything rolling out the way I need to. I'm wondering if that timed out. Probably did. I'm going to have to re-log into this quick. No, it didn't. All right. So I've got some preferred servers already set up in here. Depending on what you're doing, if you're a net new Ivanti patching customer, or if you're a Ivanti customer who's migrating from one of our on-prem products, there's a few different configuration options. We're going to choose this one here because it gives us kind of a best of both worlds. It's going to show us how this is configured, but also show us that it has some backward compatibility with that existing configuration you may already have. So when you're creating a preferred server, the first thing you need to do is you need to actually go and prepare the share where this is going to be located, because that's going to give us part of our configuration. We need to have the URL of where that location is, where that share is in our environment, and we need some credentials set up there. I'll show you some documentation in a second here that talks through some of those best practices, but there will be a read credential and a write credential to handle both sides of this experience. The read credential is the one that will be passed down to the agents, the machines that need to get access to the patches to install them. They only need read access. So this is going to limit that access so you can segment this within your environment to reduce risk. The replication side, the server needs to have files copied to it from our sync engine. That's going to need read-write access. So again, best practice, have a read credential and a write credential having access to that share, and then you can push this out. Now, preferred servers can be set up in a number of different locations. If I've got end users who can move between locations, I may want them to be able to take advantage of the most convenient preferred server to where they're located. So I'm in Minnesota. If I'm here this month, I need to get patches from my local network preferred server. If I go to our San Jose office and I'm there when patching needs to occur, I want to use that local preferred server. Or if I'm at the headquarters in Utah, I want to be able to use that one. So there's another layer to this that allows us to see create an architecture that allows us to manage multiple distribution servers in different locations. I can set up an IP range, and with that, I can designate which, what machines should connect to by different ranges. So I can name that range, like this is my, end user configuration. I can choose what type of setup I want to configure. Do I want to do a range? Do I want to do CIDR? Do I want to do it by network? And then with that, be able to go in and configure the ranges and specify which preferred server that range should communicate with. Now, if I set up multiple ranges, that means that each of these ranges will be able to be used to direct that agent to the right distribution server. The last piece that you'd set up here is you want to set up the sync engine. The sync engine, so preferred servers can be used for multiple use cases in the Neurons platform. It can be used for app distribution and patch today. There will be others that potentially will be able to use this over time as well. But this is telling the console which preferred servers that it should be syncing to. And by the way, I mentioned that there's some best practices. This is the link to that article in our help system that goes through and talks about the different ways that you can optimize your configuration, the fact that you need to use read and write credentials, the default security modes, all those things. We cover a number of those in our help topic here, so you can get some good best practices there. But here I can set up and choose which distribution servers I want to have this sync engine configure to distribute patches to. And that makes it so when new patches are needed, it's going to automatically start the process of synchronizing the patches to each of those preferred servers. Once we're configured, we can then go back to and configure this for our agent policy. So we've done the infrastructure level work now. Now we want to assign this to an agent policy so that it knows how to utilize this configuration. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the full setup here, there's a lot of different ways you can set this this type of configuration up. There's a lot of different modules that you may have in there. But in here, you can then go into turning on specific capabilities. In this case, this particular agent has our agent UI, the inventory scanner, and passive discovery turned on. Patch and other ones could be additional configurations that you could turn on in there. Under agent settings, you can choose which type of distribution options you want to enable that policy to use. Again, peer-to-peer, this is enabling a near zero infrastructure type configuration. And again, this was what we launched the Neurons platform with, and it's working for customers with tens of thousands of endpoints under management today. You can set this up to use peer-to-peer so that when something is needed, it's going to check and say, hey, any of my peers in this segment, does anybody have this patch? No? Okay, I'm going to go get it directly from the vendor then. And then when it gets that patch, it will be able to share it with the peers in that segment. Download from preferred server lets us specify that specific configuration that we want. So we can say, use this specific distribution server, or we can say, detect the distribution server based on IP address if we want that to be a floating style configuration where it can use a distribution server based on where it's located at the time. And you can mix and match these configurations. If I'm in an environment that I may have end users who go to smaller locations or remote work, and I want them to be able to use peer-to-peer and download from vendor, I can choose to enable both options. If this is maybe a manufacturing floor and all the devices there will only ever use preferred server, I can disable the one and force the focus to be on the preferred server so that I guarantee that they're getting everything from that repository that I've set up. So depending on your needs, if you've got a lot of bandwidth and you've got users that are going between sites and remote work very frequently, you may want to heavily utilize peer-to-peer. If you've got certain parts of your environment that are bandwidth restricted and you need to copy everything into that environment once and make sure that they're all being grabbed from that one location, you can force it to only use that preferred server and you can mix and match. There's some additional options there for bandwidth utilization, WAN utilization, things like that that the agent is restricted to. But again, that gives you some great flexibility to be able to configure for your specific environment needs. All right, so I'm going to grab some questions here real quick, and we'll wrap up the first portion of this. Those of you who want to stick around, we're going to run past the end of the webinar here and talk about a few other features that you may be interested in. Those will be things like scopes, maintenance windows, and what am I forgetting? Scopes, maintenance window, rollback is the other one. Those three features are what we're going to touch on next. But before we do that, I wanted to try to answer as many questions as we can before we wrap up. So Kevin had the question of how is the repository configured and can it work nicely with EPM's patch repository? Security controls has a flat repository structure. EPM has a nested or a hierarchical structure. The preferred server in Neurons is the hierarchical structure. So my understanding is you can use the same share location in Neurons that you're using for EPM, and it should just work. For those of you on security controls, that's where you need to check that box. So that way it knows that it needs to use the flat file location instead of the folder structure location. So Kevin, hopefully that answers your question. You can basically use your existing share for your configuration, and if it's an EPM share, it should just work. Again, the engine under the hood is the same, so the same patches, the same file names, all of that's the same. It's just a matter of the file structure in the security controls versus EPM versus how the cloud is doing it. ISEC was the flat file, and that's the one that needs the special check configuration. So I think that answers Will's question as well. Dustin's question, does the patch user survey require teams? The existing example today does. That's something where we're going to be looking at expanding that further. Teams was kind of a broad availability mechanism to be able to do that today. But as for those of you who are familiar with the Neurons healing module, the surveys are part of that. As that feature set expands, we'll be able to take advantage of that as well. So as they add new ways to support additional survey options, that will become available to patch as well. So Dustin, if you have an alternate way that you want to do it through a different communications platform or something like that, a feature request to the healing team for the bot side, that'll help us to make sure we understand what is the vehicle that would work best for you. But we're definitely, we understand that may be needed for other types of configs. Can we get a recording of today's session? Yes, there will be a follow-up email that will have the, for those that missed it altogether, or those that want to watch the follow-up of the recording or even rewatch parts that we've already covered, you'll be able to get the recording of that after the event today. Yes. Let's see. How does this work for standalone networks? So for a standalone network, you can configure preferred server and or peer-to-peer. In the preferred server configuration, if you want everything to just go through that, again, you would set up your file share. There's basically setting up an SMB file share with the right permissions is kind of the groundwork for this. Once you've got that in your credential set, the configuration I showed you is how to configure the platform to be able to interact with that. But you can set it up to only use preferred server, to use the combination of preferred server and peer-to-peer like I talked about, or be able to only do peer-to-peer. For a single network site, if you don't have any bandwidth restrictions, you don't have any limitations on endpoints also being able to hold on to that patch for 30 days or so, you can just run with peer-to-peer, and it's going to make it so you've got a light amount of configuration to get up and running very quickly. So kind of a pick your own approach there, whatever works best for you, Will, in that case. Shane was asking, can you create more than 3 rings? Today, you have the ability to do 2 or 3 rings. We are working over the next 2 quarters here. We're going to be expanding on that. So kind of think of this as a crawl, walk, run. We wanted to start by creating the experience. There's a lot of complexity under the hood with this. There's the scheduling complexity of multiple rings. There's the promotion. There's a lot of other working pieces under the hood there. We wanted to get this nailed down for a finite number of rings. But in the next phase of what we're doing, we're going to expand that so you can configure up to 10 rings. So far, most companies I've talked to, 3 to 5 is where they ideally want to be. I've got 1 or 2 extreme cases that are like, yeah, I got 6 or 7. One ridiculously extreme case that wants 9. I haven't seen anybody or heard anybody say more than that yet. So that's what we're going to focus on there. But yes, so Shane, between our October, sorry, too many words coming out of my mouth, October or January, we're going to deliver that expanded ring configuration to allow you to go past the 3-ring configuration. So yes, Ross, you can absolutely configure ring deployment. So think of ring deployment as it's just for that task, I want to control the rollout. So that configuration we were looking at under patch settings was focused on my routine maintenance, my monthly updating activities. For priority updates and 0-day response, currently those don't include ring deployment, but we're going to be expanding priority updates to include that in the expanded scope as well. So today you can do routine maintenance and add a ring style rollout or do a regular rollout. In the next couple releases here, we'll add that so priority updates can also do that. But the goal of priority updates, remember, is to focus on a more rapid rollout of a finite set of applications that you want to more aggressively keep up with. So ring deployment, less likely to be helpful there in many cases, and probably only a 2-ring rollout because you're going to be under a condensed cycle. Because if you're doing this, on a weekly basis, you may start on Mondays and do it every Monday, and it'll run for 5 days. If you do a 2-week span deployment for priority updates, you're kind of going past the reason for the priority updates being that more accelerated kind of time frame. So we're definitely looking at bringing ring deployment in there. 0-day response, I mean, most companies I'm talking to there, 48 hours is what they're targeting. So that is a little bit too aggressive to do any level of ring deployment. So this is what we're looking at today. Routine maintenance has ring deployment now, and that's for any updates being deployed out of there. OS, Microsoft apps, third-party apps, including browsers. So a couple of things there that may help answer your question. Do rings replace EPM autofix? So Ross, on that, rings replaces EPM's patch automation experience. Autofix is one more use case that we're also looking at. You can achieve the equivalent of autofix by saying, okay, after everything deploys through routine maintenance, I'm going to assign those updates. Once I say this is my new baseline, I'll assign those to priority updates. That's one way we can do that today. What we're planning to do, because I actually, we had a good conversation with one of our customers at our Texas event a couple months ago, and he challenged the fact that, well, wait a second, if you're saying priority updates should be doing a much more aggressive rollout of a specific group of patches, I want to be able to audit that particular group and see the cadence of those things separate from that autofix group. So for those of you who aren't familiar with EPM, autofix, think of this as just, it's your baseline. It's catching the edge cases. So an EPM configuration, you can configure autofix after patch automation, which is really another way of saying ring deployment. After ring deployment completes, I want any machines that were missed as part of that regular maintenance task to adhere to my baseline. So having a autofix task that runs on a daily or weekly basis after the automation is completed helps catch those users who, hey, this person was out on vacation during that. This person introduced a new application to their system, but it was 2 versions behind. We want to make sure that those things are captured and brought up to speed. Maybe a new machine got provisioned and didn't get fully patched before it got out to the end user, or between the point where the machine was provisioned and when it got to the user, new updates became made available. So we're going to come out with a 4th task, which is going to focus on specifically that auto fix, or what we're going to be calling continuous compliance. This is going to be, once something becomes my baseline, any machines that are out of compliance can be brought into compliance continuously. I've got some customers who are in very restrictive environments where after that maintenance is done, if you're not compliant, they will pull you off the network until you are. So that continuous compliance, or the auto fix feature in that case, is what keeps those machines up to date. And if you're not happy with that, please unplug your machine because it's not meeting our baseline. So it's kind of the catch-all for that. We're going to bring that as a fourth configuration in here to kind of round out the best practice of, here's my routine maintenance, here's more aggressive priority updates, my zero-day response, and that continuous compliance configuration all in one. So that's how we're planning to handle auto fix in the near future here. We talked about that one, so I think we're answered there. We talked about auto fix. When I create a new patch settings, it creates a ring deployment even when I don't enable. Okay, so what you're seeing there, even when you disable this, there's going to be some complexity in the scheduling there. So you make sure that you've toggled this option off, and ring deployment should go away. So you saw that just turned off the additional rings there. If I turn it back on, you see that ring configuration come back out. So check that first, and Chad, to make sure that toggle is turned off. If it is, then you should not be seeing a ring configuration. Will asks, does Ivanti offer a training and setup support assistance? Yes. Our pro services can offer a variety of different packages, what we call our outcome-based service options. You can do a basic package, which is really focused on install and a basic kind of boot camp. Here's how to get started. And you can pick some additional packages that are more invasive than that. We've got some customers who really want a larger package to be able to go into a lot more depth and not just get the product set up and running, but take a look at how they're doing things and potentially take that opportunity to reassess and look forward to how to configure differently than they're doing today. So whether you're migrating from one of our on-prem products or moving to us from Microsoft or another competitor, services like that are available. And those packages can give you kind of that simple install and basic training to very complex, give me some best practices hands-on. I work closely with a lot of our PS team. They're some of the design partners that we use to get feedback on what customers need for our product, along with our SEs and our customer success people, and then customers and partners as well. But we engage closely with our pro services team, and they're some of the most knowledgeable in the company about getting hands-on with the product and also helping to apply those best practices, like I talked about a few things there today. So yes, absolutely, Will, there is training available to cover those types of scenarios. Is there a resource that gives a deep dive into the methods that the preferred server migrates files from the core EPM? In all three products, EPM, ISEC, or Neurons, there's going to be the in-product guidance. And like I showed before, in Neurons, it's got some key recommendations, especially around the security side of things, guiding you towards trying to set that up. In the community, you may have troubleshooting guidance as well. So the combination of the product documentation and what's on the community is meant to try to help work through that. If you're still running into issues beyond that with your preferred servers, a lot of those can be environmental related and hard to track down. So those, I would recommend opening a support case if you've kind of exhausted the base recommendations and you're still running into sync errors or things like that. We've seen everything from intermittent connectivity issues causing large scale issues with something like this because you're trying to copy files over to it. It could be any number of things. But yeah, there should be help topics, forum topics, And beyond that, you may need some assistance from the support side to help track that issue down if you're running into some challenges. Chad is asking, if you go under patch management ring deployments, there's an entry there. Let me go back here, patch management, ring deployments. So this is what we looked at before, is where to configure your ring deployment. This is where you go to look at ring deployments that are running. So whether you configure ring deployment or not, this will show up here, because think of this as, this is the area where status is going to come in. So if you're not running any ring deployment configurations, this will be blank. If you are running ring deployments, then this will show you each of those ring deployments so you can drill in and see what's going on. So if we go into this test ring deployment here, we can see the devices that are in there. So in this case, I can see devices across all rings, and I can even focus on, okay, these are the devices in test. These are the devices in early adopter or in production. And I can even go in and say, oh, hey, we've had some problems with this, Win 11-2 system. We don't want them in pilot anymore. Let me take that one and move it to production instead. So a couple of our expanding features for ring deployment, we're going to be bringing device groups and other things in here to be able to set up a set of rules that will more auto-assign machines across your different rings. And when we expand to be able to do more rings, you'll see those being able to expand out here as well. You can also see a device or a patch level state in here. So I can see, all patches that have run through all rings. I can see patches that are just running through test. And I can see those patches and if they've reached promotion or not. So in this case, this Firefox and this Windows 10 update have both reached that promoted status. If I was running into an issue, like right now, these two are being assessed. So they haven't reached their threshold to determine if they're going to promote or not. I can even go in here and I can select one and I can choose to promote it to the next ring just to push it along if I feel like it's ready to go. So in a case where we have not promoted a patch, this Apache Tomcat update failed to promote. If we went troubleshot the issue and we found we resolved it, we can come in here, find that package then, and this is where you promote it to the next ring to get it to start carrying back on. Otherwise, it won't try to be redeployed until the next maintenance window, or if I put an exception place, not at all. So this experience here, Chad, is where you go in to monitor the ring deployments as they're running and be able to look back historically on that. You can also see, what's the configuration of this particular ring. It gives kind of a nice breakdown of test ring, what are the criteria that I set, when it's going to start, what's the soak time that I gave it, the projection end date. So I'll know, hey, I should come in here and check things before July 12th to make sure that, I know what's going on. That way promotion succeeds. And if there's anything I needed to dig into more, I'd know which items those were and be able to troubleshoot that. The surveys as well, that level of the configuration will be shown here, and it'll show you how many responses are coming through and if things are getting promoted there as well. So again, patch level promotion is the default success criteria. If you turn on the surveys, that's overall promotion, because if the survey goes horribly wrong, we don't know which patch it is. We're stopping the whole segment from moving forward and giving you time to troubleshoot that. Lots of good questions here. All right. Got to that one. You mentioned how you can configure a ring to deploy a Chrome update to all users without a reboot. Yes. So Will, you're running into an issue on the EPM side where Google changed some behavior over time. The cloud product it's not looking at the usage that way. EPM, I believe, has resolved that in some of the newer the newer release. It either came out in 23 or 24, but that has since been resolved there. The cloud product will not be using that same location. So Chrome was rebooting when it was unnecessary in some cases in EPM. That's not the case on the cloud side. So hopefully that helps answer your question there. EPM customers, if you're still experiencing that, get up to 2024 and later, 2025, and forward. For Neurons customers or ISEC customers, it was using a different method of determining reboot status, so it didn't run into that issue. So hopefully that answers your question there. All right. I did mention some other features, and we're running up against the 1 hour mark here pretty quick, so I'm going to jump into a couple more things. Scopes. Those of you who are using EPM and you're using scopes and waiting for that, yes, it's here now. I'm going to show you that working in Patch in just a second. And then for those of you on the Neuron side who have scopes configured for other parts of the product, you should just see this starting to work in the Patch side. So if you created a scope, you should be able to see that under access controls. May have to jump over to a different environment here if I'm not set up for that one in here. So give me a moment to double check. Yeah, I'm not set up for a scope here. Let me switch over to this environment where I know I'm set up for scopes. If everything works, the user experience around this is very boring because you really don't see anything other than the machines you should be seeing. There's a couple of indicators that show you that there's other things that you may not be seeing, though, so that it avoids any confusion. So again, I'm going to go down here to access controls. I don't have permissions to set up a scope in this, so I can't show you that part, but I can show you scopes in action here. So there's a couple of different things that are available in the platform today. There's one other piece that long-term you'll want to be aware of. You've got members. These are the people you've granted access to be able to log into the Neurons platform. You've got roles. This is the RBAC side. What capabilities do I want to give those members? Full admin, analyst only, specific, like do I want to give them a patch management admin only and they can't use other features of the platform? I can lock this down in a number of different ways. So who's allowed to log in? What capabilities are they allowed to use? Scopes is what devices are they allowed to manage? So this limits me to only seeing the devices that are in my scope and only being able to take direct action against those machines. So if I select a device, I have the ability to go and do a patch scan now, deploy a patch, do a inventory scan, run a script, run a bot. All these different things are direct actions I can take against a machine. There's one more layer here that's not in the product yet. And I call this out just so that you get kind of the best practice currently on how to set this up. And that's object level ownership. So today I can give you RBAC to limit your ability to do things. I can say you're only allowed to do patching things. You're only allowed to do bots related things. You're not allowed to cross those streams. You're only allowed to view and do reports. Scope says, oh, I'm only giving Chris the Minnesota machines, and I'm going to give somebody down in the corporate office in Utah access to those machines, but Chris and that other person are not able to cross over and directly affect each other's machines. Object ownership is where the next layer of this is going to come into play. This is going to be coming into the platform sometime next year, most likely. This is where if I've got machines from Chris's scope and from the Utah scope, both assigned to the same policy, and both me and the Utah admin have rights to change policies, we can both affect a policy that can, in essence, affect each other's machines indirectly. Scopes is meant to limit direct viewing and direct action against machines. That object ownership level is going to be the part that makes it so that I could say, I want an agent configuration all my own, and I want to limit access so that only full admins or myself can see that. And then the Utah person only has access to their stuff, and we wouldn't be able to affect each other's policies anymore. So that object ownership level is not in there yet. It's on the future roadmap, though. We're planning to bring that in. Scopes then, if it's configured, will basically limit me to seeing and interacting with only the machines that I've got. So if everything's working correctly, I don't see the machines that I should not be able to see. And you can actually see that up here. So patch intelligence and compliance reporting are the two areas where you may be able to see information broader than the scope of what machines you can directly see. Because we've got a lot of these different charts and configuration that can look beyond. If I'm looking at a patch, that patch may affect more devices than what's directly in my scope. So if I've got, something with, no, why are you doing that? I don't know why that something was pending there and decided to kick me back out. Sorry. Let me go back into, here we go. We'll go back into my filter here and say, how many devices are there for one of these updates. Now, these 33 devices may or may not be in my scope. If I click on that and I looked at the unpatched devices, I may or may not see 33 devices, depending on what's going on. It looks like I can, given my scope, all the machines that are in here are within my scope. But what we've shared here with the user is the fact that scopes are enabled. This is something that could reduce the number of devices you're able to see. So if I've only got access to 25 of those devices and this says 33, it's because there's things outside of my scope that are also affected by this. Now, it's these windows behind here. That's what's doing it. Okay, those are timing out. My apologies there. I've got several tenants open right now to show everything that I needed. So here, unpatched devices. Up here, it's giving me that warning because there may be stuff in these graphs that's going broader than my scope. Under compliance reporting, similarly, we may have a configuration that's looking broader than just my group of machines. In some of these, there's 280 endpoints. Well, if I'm limited to only seeing 40 and I go into that, one, it's warning me about that. But if I go into this compliance report, I need to be able to see the machines that I'm managing. But the compliance report is looking at a broader set of data because we want to see this org-wide potentially. So we can see the devices that I'm allowed to see. It warns me again that, that if this were limiting based on my scope, I would see those banners and column indicators showing me that there's things that I'm not allowed to see. So that's what the scopes experience looks like. Maintenance windows. This kind of overlaps with ring deployment, but in general, we can start to create maintenance windows to allow us to specify when things are allowed to happen. So if I go into agent policy, actually, I may have to go to a different tenant for this as well. I don't know if we're just deploying some of these features today, so it's turning on in all environments as we speak. So you guys will be seeing these very shortly if you're not already. Okay, good, it's here. I was pretty sure they were already done with that, but I wanted to make sure. So we've got the ability to configure a maintenance window. So if they don't give me edit rights in this one. I am gonna have to jump to another demo environment. My apologies. So yes, I'm in dev prod. We'll go to agents. Agent policies, and here, that's still my preferred server settings. Yeah, I'm wondering if it timed out. Yep, it kicked me out. Give me 1 second. Get myself logged back in here. And again, we're already coming up on the 1 hour mark. So again, if anybody does need to drop, you'll get the recording to be able to follow up on later if you choose to. So drop whenever you need to, and thank you for attending today. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to look at a maintenance window that I have configured here for patch maintenance. So if I go into that configuration, there's a number of things that we can choose to configure here. So what I typically recommend for people is think about when you need to restrict things to, and then as you're getting into configuring things like ring deployment, you can mix and match using specific scheduling options like we did before in the ring deployment configuration, or mixing that with maintenance windows. So if we're talking about wanting to do patching and we want our change window for production machines to be on Fridays between 1 and 4 p.m., That's what this configuration is based on right now. We can set that up to restrict that window. Now, in a ring deployment configuration, we may want to take some of those machines and do them in the pilot or early adopter stage. And those definitely have to run outside of Friday between 1 and 4 p.m. So we can actually configure, the first and second tasks in that ring configuration to run at specifically scheduled times. And the third task, the production task, we can say use maintenance windows. But this allows us to go in and configure what we want those maintenance windows to be. I could say, I want my maintenance windows to be every Wednesday and Friday. I can do what, even going through and doing daily or monthly or yearly tasks. Those will get into other things that you may want to do in other areas, but typically with patching, daily, weekly, maybe monthly, those are the typical windows you're going to do for patch-related use cases. Weekly, probably the most common. So if I want a maintenance window that's going to repeat every week on Wednesdays and Fridays between 1 and 4 p.m., I can update that, and now I've got my maintenance window configured. I can then go back into my patch task, and I can configure that to utilize that maintenance window where I need it to. So if we go into our ring deployment configuration that we did before, we've got it set up to use a monthly schedule for triggering the start of my ring deployment. Patch Tuesday, in this case, it was using monthly, but in that case, most of you are going to use actually the Patch Tuesday starting point. That way you don't have to pick and choose more things. But that makes it so on Patch Tuesday, my configuration starts. And because this is my test group, I want that to run on, the day after Patch Tuesday, so Wednesday, and I want that to run at 3 p.m. on that Wednesday. So that pilot group will get patched at 3 p.m. And again, we have options to do things like we could use a maintenance window, but if we do that, it's going to use that Wednesday or Friday. So machines are either going to patch in that window that we chose for Wednesday or for Friday. If we're trying to keep to a very tight schedule of how we want to do the rollout, if we do, this first stage might work. We start on Wednesday. We give it 2 days of soak time, so Thursday, Friday. That would actually work where we could have machines deploying in both of those. Looks like Goldcast is going to kick me out in about a minute here, so I'm going to wrap up. But we can go through and configure each of these tasks to execute on local time or using that maintenance window. So that gives you the ability to jump back and forth. So that is about all we're going to have time for today. There are some other great features coming. Audit, those of you who are familiar with the audit trails feature, you're going to now see that there's, I don't have access to it in this tenant, but that audit trail is now going to include a bunch more of the patch auditable tasks. So configuration changes, direct actions taken, all of those will be captured in there. And then the rollback. The first phase of rollback is added in there to be able to go and select a machine, select a specific patch, roll that back, and even add that into be an exception in the policy that it was included in. So that should wrap us up today. We got a lot of stuff coming this quarter. So those of you who are already on Neurons, you got a lot of new stuff to play with. Those of you who have been waiting for a feature before you start your migration, again, lots of good stuff in there. I apologize we didn't get a chance to wrap up all the questions. We did get to most of them. And again, you'll get the recording very shortly here so you can go back and rewatch some of the demonstration.